Muslim pray and how they behave, and maybe people will realize that there's nothing to be afraid of if you know Muslims or if you have Muslims as friends and neighbors. But the most important event for us is the candlelight vigil for peace and unity. We are planning a huge event at the downtown plaza in Gainesville, where we are going to be doing a little bit what we do every week, just at a larger scale. Every week, we feed the homeless in downtown Gainesville. We're going to be doing the same thing. Every holiday, every Muslim holiday, we try to donate blood to Life South. So we invited them to bring 2 buses on the Bo Diddley Plaza, the downtown in downtown Gainesville, and we're going to be collecting blood donations for our local hospitals. We also contacted the Gainesville Public Library, and they gave us a wish list of books. So basically, during the whole afternoon, we're going to be collecting pledges for books for the Gainesville Public Library. Also, we're organizing a food drive because it's good to feed the homeless one time, but it's also very interesting to have a system in place where when the homeless need food, they know where to find it and it is available. So all the food that we're going to be collecting will be given to St. Francis House, for example, or other organizations that feed the homeless on a regular basis. Finally, and the most important part of that event is a candlelight vigil for peace, where we invited all the leaders of the organizations that have been supportive to us. They're going to make a short statement, and after that, we're going to light our candles, observe a minute of silence in the memory of the victims of September 11th, and for peace and unity and tolerance and mutual respect. Muslims believe that if we stand together, we can achieve great things together, as opposed to looking at each other's differences. Finally, there's another very big event on the 10th of September. It's hosted by a church, actually. And what's going to be happening there is we're going to be reading from the different holy scriptures of the major religions in Gainesville. We're going to be reading from the Quran, we're going to be reading from the Bible, we're going to be reading from the Torah and other holy scriptures. It's going to be a long event where dinner is going to be provided, but most of all, it's we are trying to get together, get to know each other, and get closer to each other, as opposed to focusing on differences.
I want to bring into this conversation Mustafa Bayoumi. Your book is called How Does It Feel to Be a Problem Being Young and Arab in America? Talk about what's happening right now with this planned Quran burning. We had the angry protests against the downtown Islamic Community Center 2 blocks from Ground Zero. We had this burning of a construction site of a planned mosque in Tennessee. Put this all in context for us.
Well, yeah, I think we are seeing a flare-up of a kind of anti-Muslim sentiment in the country that is, frankly, very troubling. Of course, it's nothing that's so brand new, ever since September 11, 2001, and really beforehand as well. But since September 11, 2001, we've seen a rise of anti-Muslim sentiment within the country. Polling data will bear this out. You have many polls done year after year that talk about what's the general population's view of Muslims, for example. And usually those polls, of late anyways, show that somewhere between 40 and 50% of the American population harbor or admit to harboring prejudice against Muslims. But what you find, I think, in recent years, especially over the last few months, is that this has taken a different kind of turn. It's become more a kind of vitriolic, sort of community-based anger at Muslims. And frankly, it seems very surprising, I think, to many people in the Muslim community who had been counting on the good graces of their neighbors and understanding to carry on the traditions of the free exercise of religion in the country and just the daily actions of American democracy.
Are you concerned about Saturday night being the end of Ramadan? It's also September 11th, the iftar dinner, the final dinner of Ramadan, being a time of celebration, and yet it falling on September 11th, and how that could be misconstrued.
Yes, I think not only am I concerned, but in fact many of the mainstream and major Muslim organizations have actually asked their congregations and their communities to play down the levels of celebration this year, so it doesn't seem like it's somehow a celebration of the September 11, 2001, of the of the attacks, which would be horrible if that were seen to be the case. But by the same token, I do think it's important, as you mentioned in your introduction, it's very important to emphasize the people of good conscience in the country who are actually standing up to oppose this kind of anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-Muslim fervor that we see. There are many, and what we need to have actually is many more, particularly from the political leadership, I think, in this country. And they have been, I think, very cowardly in being willing to stand up for the fundamental principles, particularly the free exercise of religion. And I think it's important, I think it's important in that regard to highlight people like Mayor Bloomberg and Scott Stringer and others, including public figures such as yourselves or Jon Stewart, who have stood very eloquently and who have spoken out eloquently for the rights of Muslims, understanding that if you are actually supporting the rights of Muslim Americans, what you're really doing is supporting your right as an American for those to exercise those same rights.
Well, it almost seems like, and we've seen this before in American history, people trying to redefine what being an American means.
I think that's exactly right. I think that I think that the definition of being an American is something that is constantly in process. It's nothing that's settled, and in fact, it's a procedure. It's a process that continues from the very beginning of this country until today. And what we find of late, I think, is a disturbing measure of what it means to be an American. I in fact, think that it's also important to place the anti-Muslim sentiment that we see today alongside the kind of anti-immigrant feeling that we see today. So I think if we consider the Arizona initiatives, for example, or just the general pervasive anti-immigrant feeling that you have directed largely against Latinos and Hispanics in this country, alongside the anti-Muslim sentiment, and I would also put in that same parameter the polling data that we see that sees that President Obama is 20% of the population which wants to say that President Obama is a Muslim. I think that that's actually a thinly disguised way of talking about President Obama's racial background. It's a way of saying he's not like us. And so that rather than using the traditional language, the traditional discourse of race in this country, which is to call him an African American or such, they call him instead a Muslim, which is a way of saying he's not one of us.
We have to leave it there. Mustafa Bayoumi, Mayor Lowe, and Ghanimi, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Amy Goodman with Sharif Dakoudous.